Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
Welcome to this episode of Street Soldiers on Sean Diddy Combs' legal issues. First, there was a slew of civil lawsuits alleging sex trafficking, sexual assault, and other disturbing crimes. Then on March 25th, federal raids on his homes in Los Angeles and Miami ramped up the potential consequences. Combs has continued to deny all the accusations, but now that a federal investigation is underway, his very freedom could be on the line. On March 25th, the image of armored vehicles rolling along the tree-lined streets of wealthy Holmby Hills shocked viewers. In this video from Fox 11, you can see Homeland Security agents in tactical gear with long guns lining up in what's called a stack at the gate to Sean Diddy Combs' $40 million compound, acting on search warrants. Diddy's attorney, Aaron Dyer, called the raids a gross overuse of military-level force. The equipment was most likely the result of concerns about guns and drugs on the property, says Homeland Security expert Hal Kempfer.
We're looking at HSI going in kind of heavy, armored vehicles, ballistic protection, assault rifles, basically, with a lot of other things that they needed because they were very concerned about the threat assessment. What was there?
For several decades following the murder in 1997 of his Bad Boy Records superstar, Notorious B.I.G., Sean Diddy Combs has been a larger-than-life figure. He set trends in music, fashion, lifestyle, and branding as a businessman and entrepreneur. He's even appeared on Broadway and in feature films. He applied his music industry-honed marketing skills to his Sean John clothing line, Ciroc Vodka, Revolt TV, and other ventures, before the lawsuits compelled many entities to cancel their association with him. Diddy's cultural footprint was huge, says New York Post lifestyle reporter Asia Grace.
Diddy was the untouchable man. He was on the Mount Rushmore of hip-hop moguls. There was nothing he couldn't do, no space that he couldn't dominate, whether that was music, pop culture, fashion, education, politics. I mean, my entire life, Diddy was the man.
The civil lawsuit allegations have already cost Combs millions of dollars in losses from canceled deals. There was public humiliation on social media where the more sensational claims spread like wildfire. Combs continues to deny the allegations, but claims made in civil cases can lead to criminal investigations and criminal charges, says criminal defense attorney Dante Mills.
They move forward with a civil case, but in that civil case, they spell out what happened. And because of who they were suing, Sean Combs, it got people's attention. And the way the investigators work is they're just kind of out and about and they're looking and they have their eyes open and their ears open. And when they see something that they think could be illegal activity, they start to investigate.
Let's get more into this with our panel. Joining me now is Hal Kempfer. He's a Homeland Security expert and also a retired intelligence officer. Hal, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa.
We appreciate it. Also with us is Asia Grace. She is a lifestyle reporter with the New York Post, also covers many celebrities. Asia, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Dante Mills. He's a criminal defense attorney and law professor. Dante, thank you so much for being with us.
Lisa, always a pleasure.
Thank you. Dante, I want to start with you on this. The number of civil lawsuits against Sean Diddy Combs seems overwhelming to a lot of people. Is this unprecedented?
No, but I can tell you what caused this to happen. I represent a lot of high-profile people in these types of situations, and I believe it was handled absolutely wrong. So what happened is, as many people remember, Cassie threatened to bring a lawsuit. They were having negotiations and talks between her lawyers and Diddy's lawyers, and those talks did not resolve the issue. So she moved forward with the lawsuit. The problem is they allowed it to move forward to a lawsuit, which sometimes happens, but then they settled the case immediately after. If you guys remember, it came out that the case was open maybe that Friday, and then after the weekend, by the time the weekend was over, the case was already settled.
Right.
What that did is embolden everybody that had an interaction with Diddy, and they thought, all I have to do is bring a lawsuit and cha-ching, my check is coming next. So that opened up the floodgates. It emboldened people to come forward. And once all of those people came forward with civil cases, that alerted the federal authorities, the FBI, to investigate criminally. So they began to see a lot of civil cases that were involving sexual misconduct, mistreatment. Some of the lawsuits, in fact, alleged sex trafficking, and that got the attention of the law enforcement officials or authorities, and they began to do this research, and that brought us to where we are now.
Asia Grace, what about the celebrity status of Sean Diddy Combs?
Well, Lisa, from dipping in the bins with the spoilers to dipping out on the feds was just completely a transition that no one expected to see Diddy make ever. I mean, if there was a Mount Rushmore of hip hop moguls, true moguls, he would have easily been up there as like the George Washington. I mean, his hands were in everything from music to fashion, television, education, politics. I mean, for my whole life, since the early 90s till today, he has been that guy. His larger than life personality is what brings people to him, but also he was the kingmaker when it came to hits. I mean, he's worked with everybody, your favorite's favorite, Mariah Carey, Faith Evans, Biggie, Mary J. Blige, Craig Mack, Mace, the list goes on, Janet Jackson, the list goes on and on and on. So on top of him being such a crazy, wild, opulent presence in hip hop and in pop culture, he also knew what he was doing behind the scenes with music. His name, Bad Boy Records, that became synonymous with hip hop. So to see this all unfolding now today is a shock to a lot of people, and for the younger people who don't really understand his impact, to learn how influential he was in almost everyone's life. I mean, Usher, Justin Bieber, I could go on and on.
And I want to point out too that Diddy has denied the allegations in all of the cases with a blanket denial. And in terms of what happened in Los Angeles, his attorney, another attorney, put out a statement on his behalf saying he denies that he has done anything wrong, and actually criticized the law enforcement response. Hal, you were there. You were on scene actually watching the live coverage unfold of the raid in his Holmby Hills $40 million mansion in Los Angeles with our sister station, Fox 11 Los Angeles. What do you make of that? Help us understand what was going on there.
Well, Homeland Security Investigations, which is not the most famous federal investigative agency, they look at a variety of things to include human trafficking, and as a subset of that is sex trafficking. They look at international, they look at interstate. Obviously, that must have been, from what we can take, part of the pretext of why they were there. Now, as you saw, they came in with armored vehicles. They were wearing ballistic vests, helmets. Basically, they were ready for some sort of threat situation that could get very serious very fast. Anytime that you're doing a search warrant like this, you have to be aware of what's going on. Now, there have been allegations made that there were drugs that were at these properties. Certainly, obviously, as we talked about, the sex trafficking or related activities that brought up in the civil suits, but also there were allegations of guns at these properties. And I think that went into the threat assessment, which is why HSI, along with LAPD, there was other, local law enforcement was there as well. They went in heavy at first. They used a lot of caution. And of course, as we saw, they went through the property, very thoroughly.
We'll be right back after this.
The government steps in and they say that these criminal activities happened. Diddy could go to jail.
Hal, in terms of the evidence that they collect, then what happens after a search like the one that we saw in the Holmby Hills mansion?
Something justified the search warrant. They probably have a lot of information of meetings, events, whatever took place in the property. Part of what they want to do is to go in there and look at the property and see if it matches up with what they were told. Is the furniture, is the room, are the rooms connecting the way that somebody said they're connecting? This gets to be very important, especially if, when they get on the stand later on, if they're describing events that may have taken place, they want to make sure that the way it was described actually fits the physical surroundings. So they're going to be looking at that. And then they're going to be going through very carefully, looking at all the electronic media. And by the way, the thought that you can go in and delete pictures and stuff, that's a wonderful idea. The reality is, once it's out there, there's a lot of tools that they can recover that. And I think that's why they did this sudden onslaught. They came in heavy, they came in fast, was to go in there, catch them by surprise, and avoid anything where they'd be possibly destroying evidence, especially to include electronic evidence. They want to get those texts, they want to get the emails, they want to get any pictures, video, anything that's out there they want to get, particularly for HSI, because that's kind of in their jurisdictional bailiwick.
Dante, in terms of the civil cases, and I want to point out, Sean Diddy Combs has denied all of the allegations blanket of the civil of all of these recent cases. But in terms of these are civil cases, and then we see law enforcement action, which is in accord with a criminal case. How do prosecutors make the jump from civil cases and then now it looks like it's turning into a federal law enforcement case?
Sure. So with the civil cases, those are individuals that are saying Diddy did something specifically to them. Either he sexually abused them or whatever the allegations are. They're saying Sean Combs did this to me. The government steps in, and the prosecutors, the U.S. attorneys step in on behalf of the government, and they say that these criminal activities happened to other people. So the government is the one who's responsible for moving forward with criminal charges. Now, in civil cases, money is at the end. Your compensation, right? You can't take away what happened to somebody. You can't remove that memory or that experience, but you can compensate them with money. On the criminal side, it's not going to be a monetary compensation. It'll be Diddy could go to jail.
Asia, do you think that he can ever recover from this?
Well, never say never, but if he should, I mean, this would be a resurrection of biblical proportions. Unfortunately, we've seen that, he has been in line to get a lot of different recognitions this year specifically that have since been walked back since things have come to the surface. We see that Sean John, his clothing line, has been removed from a lot of shelves, and that he stepped away from Ciroc. He stepped away from Revolt, and there's different conversations about his involvement with his school in Harlem. So there is a lot that has transpired in a very short amount of time. And just to Dante's point about the law enforcement gathering all the information they can. We had an NYPD detective connect with one of my colleagues at the New York Post, and he has been very intricately involved in Diddy over the last several years. And he said that it's a high probability that there is someone very close to him that could be sharing information. So, not only is it, 50-50 chance that he'll recover, but then he has to also kind of check his circle, see what, who he keeps around him, and maybe tighten that up a bit.
How, when you look at this now, just from your experience, with various cases, does it seem as if there is, as Asia brought up, there might be an inside informant or somebody in his camp that is close to him currently?
It's interesting. Well, I look at it from an intelligence standpoint, intelligence collection standpoint, and in this case, it's an evidence collection standpoint. It sounds to me very likely there could be a confidential informant. As you know, his alleged drug and gun mule was arrested at the airport down by Miami. I thought that was kind of interesting. Florida law has makes that a felony with the drugs he was found with. And my immediate thought is, if he's not already an informant, they're going to use that as pressure on him to try and, pardon the expression, flip him. To be a witness against him. But I do think they have a lot of inside information. With that said, with all the civil suits that have taken place, there are those who are extremely close to him, who have a lot of inside information. And I think certainly for the federal prosecutors, they may have been able to gather enough from that to do it.
Dante, where does something like this go? What are the next steps that are the next possible steps? I mean, will we hear of actual arrests related to this case in addition to the associate that was charged on the drug charge in Miami? What do you think are some of the possibilities?
Here's how these investigations play out. And I always tell my clients, assume, especially when you're dealing with federal investigators, whether it's the FBI, Homeland Security, assume they know everything. I'll tell you a very quick story. I had a client, high profile situation. And it came in when I was having conversations with the U.S. attorney and the investigator. They were telling me things that he was talking about when he was working out at the gym with the person working out beside him. Wow. They know everything, right? It's their job to investigate, and they're extremely good at it. So we have to assume that they did their due diligence. They did all of the investigation prior to making this move. They may have just had enough information and been ready for the next step. So what do they do now that they've made this move? I think that it's important, imperative for Diddy's attorneys to reach out to those U.S. attorneys, start that dialogue, see which direction this is going, and then decide. He can decide if this is a path he wants to go down, where he's saying, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm going to fight this, or does he want to start having conversations early to see how this can be resolved. But best believe they have all of the information they need. They're going to expand on that. Now that people have been spooked by this, they're going to come forward because they don't want to get in trouble.
Dante, in terms of the law, sex trafficking, human trafficking, what do the prosecutors need in order to bring a charge like that?
So it can vary depending on the severity, depending on the activity. If they have someone who says that they were forced to do something against their will, that's the basis of a criminal charge. And then now we look at the extent of that. What were they forced to do? If it was multiple times that they were forced to do it, if the person, so say, for example, if somebody forced somebody to do something, that's sexual assault. But if they force somebody to do something with someone else and they receive the benefit for it, say money, if they received money and made that person or instructed someone to give them sexual favors in exchange for the money they got, that's the sex trafficking part, where you have these exchanges of money for sexual favors or other kind of favors for sexual favors for people who did it against their will. And that's what we're going to have to look at here. Were there things done against people's will? At least you talked about it, where people drugged and forced to do things that otherwise they would not have consented to? Were they paid or by threat forced to do something that otherwise they would not have consented to? That's what it's going to come down to.
Just to Dante's point, though, about the sex trafficking, whether it's true or not, the allegations, Diddy also holds fame in his hand. So, a lot of people who may or may not have been involved in any of these situations that they're claiming, there's this level of, if you do X, you'll get Y, when it comes to somebody on his level. If they want to be that superstar, Grammy Award winning singer, if they want to be a reality star, a movie star, a sports figure, whatever, he's the person to be connected to. So it does look like, though he still has the trappings of a tycoon and the status, a lot of people could have fallen into certain traps potentially because of who he is and the power that he holds in a lot of different spaces.
Hal, as part of the HSI investigation, would they be looking at his assets or looking at his money that he has?
I would say probably yes. I would say they've looked at his assets very carefully. One of the things you're going to be watching for is title, ownership, and the money itself moving in a lot of different ways. And I have to tell you today, the international financial scene, from an investigative standpoint, has never been more complex. Things move in ways. Things move from cash or assets into crypto, which becomes extremely tough to trace all around the world. But also moving it from various, shell companies in various different countries, certain countries that have rather lax banking laws and stuff. One thing I'll say on the financial crime side, the federal government is probably a lot more sophisticated about this now than they were, say, 10, 20 years ago, even a few years ago, just because of global events.
Asia, what about the narrative? Is it possible that he become the bad boy that wins?
We have seen Diddy, take that. He's found his way out of a lot of sticky situations throughout the years, namely that incident in 1999 involving J-Lo and Shine at the club in New York City. So we know that there have been times in his history that he has come out on top in situations that it didn't really seem like he really would. It's definitely a situation that I don't think he ever predicted himself to be in, and the fans, the public, never imagined that he would find himself in this position. If he has friends in high places that are tied to him in business ways, and they want to make sure that their business stays, good and in good standing because of who he is, there's a way possibly that he can come out of this. But as Hal and Dante have both said, the FBI, the feds, they don't miss.
Dante, in terms of the next steps, like who would actually be in charge of this, or would there be
Yes.
multiple? Is there the possibility of multiple cases in multiple locations?
So from my understanding, the Southern District of New York is taking the lead on this, and they would have the ability to reach out to other jurisdictions. As we see, his home in Miami was raided, his home in California, so they can reach out to other jurisdictions. Now, if these things are all related, they can bring them under one jurisdiction and say they're all a nexus or connected to each other. As long as things happened in New York, then the Southern District of New York has the jurisdiction.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Sean Diddy Combs. You can watch it again and share it on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.